Like toothpaste out of the tube, words can't be put back in. The damage was done. That moment on the phone, my graceless tongue was laser focused on somebody I didn't know. I knew I should have been more gracious. I knew it. You know it. We all know it. Grace is the better way. But sometimes grace is hard to come by. Welcome to Living the Grace Life podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Sakata, and you've made your way to the corner of real grace for your real life. Do you ever feel like grace is more Sunday morning concept than everyday lived experience? Me too. Too often, grace is a side dish we hear from the pulpit, but not the nourishment that restores connection and rebuilds relationships on Mondays. Here at Living the Grace Life podcast, we replace the overwhelm of doing more and living less with a slower pace that nurtures God's grace in our ordinary, everyday lives. Grace for you, grace for them. Are you ready? Let's grace this life. Have you ever walked into a room knowing everyone else was going to be better than you at whatever it was you were about to do? This was definitely one of those moments for me. I sat at the table, splashed with all its paint and artwork from all the people before, surrounded by moms whose creativity seemed to blossom the moment we walked in. Immediately, all my insecurities rose to the surface, and I could literally feel myself sweating as these moms and all their excitement began to create what was in their heads onto their canvases. In front of me was a blank canvas with nothing going on upstairs. I had no clue, no ideas about what I might put on my canvas. Our instructor suggested I think about a word or a creative way to enhance a word. And it's funny, actually, because the moment we walked into the art studio, the word grace tumbled around in my head. But I dismissed it as one of those common, ordinary, everyday words that everybody else already knows. I wanted something more art-worthy, something people could walk into our home and look at and say, wow, that's cool. But the longer I sat, the more the word grace pestered my mind. I remembered how ungracious I'd been earlier in the day when my son wanted to hit balls off the baseball tee before I left that evening. There was a constant frustration I felt when they asked for just one more thing, Mom. I cringed at the tone in my voice as I criticized my husband for something he didn't do the way I wanted him to. And then there was that mini tantrum with the customer service agent on the phone who was about as disinterested in service as the customer she was speaking to. I wasn't, shall we say, very gracious in my response. Out came the deluge of words I immediately regretted the moment that came out of my mouth. But like toothpaste out of the tube, right? Words can't be put back in. The damage was done. Have you been there too? That moment on the phone, my graceless tongue was laser focused on somebody I didn't even know. I was so overwhelmed by doing more and trying harder that wasn't the only interaction I wished I could take back, but couldn't. In those situations, I knew I should have been more gracious. I knew it. You know it. We all know it. We know that grace is the better way. But sometimes grace is hard to come by, right? Do you know what I mean? My canvas was about to receive some color. Grace was exactly what I needed to decorate my walls, my life too. We've all heard about grace and we know we need it. But what is grace really? What does it sound like in the overwhelm of a busy and doing more life? What's grace supposed to look like when you're in the middle of a hard conversation or some impossible situation? Maybe your baby won't go back to sleep and you're exhausted. Or maybe you're that mom in Target and your toddler is having a tantrum because they have more energy than you do in that moment. What is grace then? Or what about that comment your friend made? Is grace pretending she didn't actually say that thing and you responding, no big deal, when you and I know full well it was a big deal? Can I be honest for a moment? In fact, let's get something out of the way right from the beginning. I'm all about real here. So let's just be honest from the start. Too often, grace is more like a side dish we hear about on Sundays, but not the nourishment that restores connection and rebuilds relationships on Mondays. Maybe grace is more stored in our heads than nurtured as lived experience. Kind of like that narrator in a Charlie Brown episode. Do you remember? Wah 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 wah. Well, grace is it's that muffled voice that has something important about who we're becoming, but it gets drowned out in the movements of ordinary everyday life. If this resonates with you, you're not alone. Here at Living the Grace Life, we invite God to help us replace the overwhelm of doing more and living less with a slower pace that nurtures God's grace in our ordinary, everyday lives. Here on the podcast, some weeks we'll welcome a guest whose grace walk in ordinary life helps us walk ours. Other weeks, you and I will nurture grace as we discover how to pray the scriptures while exploring different topics of grace. Whether it's a solo episode or a shared interview, every week is about living real grace in our real lives. It's been well over 10 years since I painted the word grace with those blooming leaves curling around and through my no longer white canvas. It was actually pretty cool the way it turned out. But our home hasn't been the same since. Now, I wish I had my artwork to show you, but in a cleaning frenzy a couple years back, I donated it to our local Goodwill. I'm actually kind of bummed about it, honestly, especially as Living the Grace Life blossoms and comes to be. But I'm really glad I didn't just throw it out, because I like to think that somewhere in someone's life and home, grace is growing, like the Holy Spirit prompted me to let it grow in my life and in our family's life. And that's my hope for you here at Living the Grace Life, that you would receive your place as a beloved daughter or son, slowed and softened, nurtured and released by God's real grace into your ordinary, everyday, real life. Welcome in, friend. I'm so glad you're here. See you next time. Thanks for joining our conversation today at Living the Grace Life podcast. If this episode has encouraged you, be sure and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you'd be so kind, would you please leave your 5-star review so other listeners would be equipped to live the grace life too? As always, you can find me at jennifersakata.com or on Instagram or Facebook. I'd love to connect with you there. Until next time, live the grace life generously, friend. Grace for you, grace for them.